Hi and welcome back to my channel. My name is Chioma, and today I want to talk about 6 reasons why moving to another country or relocating abroad may not be for you. So don't go anywhere. All right, okay, so I'm going to be touching on points that are related to the experience of people who move to another country and then decide for several reasons that they have made the wrong move, people who will struggle to thrive in a new country, struggle to adapt, and there are also people within that category who ultimately make the choice to pack up and return to wherever they've come from. Yes. Even here in Australia, I have met 1 or 2 people who fall within that category and they've gone back home. So I feel like the conversation around moving abroad or relocating to another country is not quite balanced, and oftentimes we don't hear all these other stories that don't represent a successful relocation or a successful settlement into another country, and that's why I am making this video right here. Okay, so some of these reasons will be related to the kinds of experiences that might make people to decide to return to their home country. Some of them might just be pain points that I am trying to highlight in this video so that you do your best to avoid. Okay, so let's get straight to it. Number 1, if you are someone who is relatively established in their career, and by this I mean that you're probably top level, so you've actually put in a lot of work, you've gone through the promotion system a fair few times, and you've probably spent a few years building your career to where you're at. Now, if you think about the prospect of having to drop several levels lower and beginning to build back up again when you move to another country, or if the thought of having to entirely abandon that career as a result of not being able to meet registration or assessment or certification requirements in the new country, because some occupations would actually require for you to do this in the new country. So if the thought of struggling with any of these processes and potentially not making it, okay, is something that leaves you breaking out in a sweat, or just hearing me speak about these things is already getting you nervous, maybe you want to reconsider your plans and think about your plans really carefully. Now, I am not saying that this might be enough for you not to relocate, but I'm just saying for you to keep that at the forefront of your mind, because unfortunately, I have met a few people here in Australia who fall within that category of people who have struggled for years to meet some of these requirements and they have not been successful. Now, what ends up happening in these cases is that these people find themselves doing other things that they never envisaged in their journey, in their plans of living in another country. And you only have to have a conversation with them to see how frustrated they are. Like, sometimes the frustration is written all over them. And so maybe you want to think about your options really carefully. If you are already established in your career, you're doing well, then you really want to think about your priorities and why you want to move abroad. So moving on to number 2. If you are someone who's got a fixed mindset about life, and by this I mean you're just set in your ways, okay, and you're not willing to budge. I guess that's the important bit right there. You're not flexible. You're not willing to try new things. You have a particular way of thinking around social issues, cultural issues, mentally as well. You just have a one-track mind and you're not willing to budge from that. Now, the kinds of people that I see that fall within this category are people who are moving from deeply conservative backgrounds, for instance. So if you're coming from Nigeria to a place like Australia, for instance, which is very liberal and progressive, and you're the kind of person, like I said, whose mindset is really fixed about a lot of things, and most importantly, you're not willing to change, there's no flexibility with you, you might struggle. And vice versa, if you're moving from a really liberal and free place, okay, to a conservative country, again, I feel like this plays out either way. So again, I see people who struggle because of this reason. All right. So moving on to number 3, unrealistic expectations about the timeline of settlement. Now, this is a tricky one because I feel like everyone to some extent might have to deal with this at some point. Because when you're going to a new country, obviously you've never been there before, you are very limited in your knowledge of what actually obtains on ground. And so a lot of the planning around what your life would look like would be done mostly blindly. Yes, there is the internet and you can research a lot of things on the internet. There's a wealth of information online, but even so, there's still some limitation to how much we can expect or how much projections we can make into what our lives will actually look like in a new country, okay? But what I am referring to here are people who have built unrealistic expectations about certain milestones in their relocation experience or their relocation goals. For instance, a lot of people think that they'll be making a lot of money once they arrive in the country. Some people might be like, oh, I'm just going to take 1 year to settle in and then after that I'll start making money. Now, I am not saying that this is completely unrealistic or that it is not feasible. Okay, for some people it actually works, but for the most part, okay, your first 1 year is going to be spent adjusting to the new environment, depending on the circumstances surrounding your arrival in the country, which would also include the visa type that has brought you into the country. That expectation may not be realized as soon as you as you expect. As a matter of fact, I have read that it takes anywhere between 5 to 7 years to feel completely settled in a new country. Now, I used the making money example, okay, just as an example, but there are other things as well that might inform your relocation goals, which you will quickly realize when you arrive that they might not happen according to the timeline that you are expecting, okay? As a matter of fact, I made a whole video about this, so maybe you want to check out that video because I went into more details around how to set yourself up before you even arrive in the country or shortly after you arrive to make sure that your settlement experience is a bit easier and that there's less pain points along the way in your settlement. There's going to be a link in the description and also a card up on the screen if you want to click on that. But stay here and finish watching this one before you move on to that one, okay? All right, so moving on to number 4. But before I say anything about number 4, which is actually closely related to number 3, maybe you want to take a moment here, and I'm talking just a few seconds, to subscribe and like this video. Yes, please give me a thumbs up if you're enjoying the video so far and you feel like I am making sense, okay? And don't forget to turn on notifications as well, right? So let's move on to number 4. Number 4, improper planning, inadequate planning, not doing your independent research. I can talk on and on and on about this one, guys. I find it really frustrating personally when you ask someone about their relocation plans and, you know, the dominant answer they give you is, oh, we just want to get the visa first and we'll figure that out when we arrive, or we just want to get the visa. Yes, I know that there's a huge focus on just getting the visa, especially given that in Nigeria, at the moment, I feel like there's a lot of desperation on ground as a result of all the nonsense going on, and a lot of people are thinking about leaving the country. Yes, the visa is really important. Without the visa, you're going nowhere. But equally as important is thinking about what happens after you get the visa. I feel like people do not spend anywhere near enough time thinking about that. And believe it or not, that could mean the difference between having a smoother settlement experience or having so many frustrations in that experience that you begin to question the wisdom of leaving your home country in the first place. Yes, it can be that huge, and I've seen people who have struggled in this manner. If you're a student, for instance, or someone who is hoping to go through study to gain PR, have you really thought about the prospects of the course you're coming to study? Or are you just relying on what some random agent has told you? You have higher stakes in the prospect of success in that journey than the agents that you have paid. To the agent, it is just a business. They are making money. And this is the area where I feel a lot of people fall into a trap. Just because you can afford to pay an agent does not mean that you go to sleep and just wait for whenever the visa is granted. Do your independent research. No matter what anybody tells you, you should be reading up on this stuff yourself. You should be able to verify whatever anybody tells you and the veracity of the information that you're getting from anywhere and from any source. For instance, if you're coming in as a student, have you thought about the prospects of the course you're coming to study? Okay? If the agent has told you that it would lead to PR, have you actually researched the veracity of that information? A lot of people, I can't tell you how many people I have met here who have fallen into that trap of just coming in, okay, with the intention or the focus just being on having a visa granted so that they can leave Nigeria, and then they land in Australia to go do a course that has no prospect. It would lead you nowhere. As a matter of fact, you're just coming to give these people your money and then go back home, okay? Which I am not saying there's anything wrong with. If that is the goal for you, maybe you just want to study and then return home, that's fine. But if you're hoping to gain PR through study, have you actually thought about whether the course you're coming in to study will lead to PR? I see a lot of people who apply for student visa after student visa. One expires, they jump into another just to maintain their stay in a country. As you can imagine, being an international student is not a cheap experience, okay? It is highly expensive. And you can imagine someone working for years and years just to pay school fees and remain in the country. Now, if you are confused, I did make a video about choosing a course to study to lead towards PR and all the steps that you should be taking to find the right course to study. Please watch that video. Again, there's going to be links in the description box below, and you might also click on a card that will pop up on the screen and it will take you to that video, okay? Please watch that video. I think it will be helpful. Now, if you are coming in as a family, have you thought about your family situation in terms of your finances? Have you really thought about it? Have you thought about how the needs of your family might change, especially in those first few years when you're still adjusting to your new environment? Will both of you work? I mean, both parents or both spouses. Will you work? If you've got children and one person needs to stay home, what will that mean for your family finances? If both of you are going to work, or if one person is going to be studying, okay, remember that as an international student, you would most likely have restrictions on how many hours you can work. So what will that mean, okay, for being able to still meet your family obligations or your financial obligations to your family? Soon after you arrive in the country, okay, will your children become progressively eligible to be enrolled in school? Have you thought about it? Because they will also have to pay international fees if you're still on a temporary visa. Are you thinking about all these things? Or are you just relying on something that some agent is saying to you, or something that someone who went through that process 6 years ago is saying to you? Remember that immigration policies change all the time and without warning. So what might actually have applied 6 years ago, 5 years ago, 4 years ago may not be applicable now. So please do not rely on anything but first-hand information that you're getting by yourself from reliable sources. If you are in doubt, the best place to go for anything immigration related would be the official government website. And again, you can find information about that in the description box below. And just in case you were wondering, in terms of finances and in terms of cost of living, I also made a video about the cost of living here in Sydney. So maybe you want to check that video out and see for yourself the sorts of things that you can expect to be spending money on when you arrive here, especially if you're arriving as a family. But if you're single, still watch that video. It will give you a good idea as well. So let's move on to number 5. People who thrive on social connection. And by this, I mean people who are not able to be away from family, from friends for any length of time. Now, this might sound like it's something that affects single people more, but that's not true. That's not the case. I know people who have come in here as a family, but then they still struggle, or one person within that family still struggles because they've left most of their social network behind, okay? Their friends are no longer easily accessible. They're not able to hang out with their friends like before or family. And believe me, there are people who struggle with this. There are people who even question whether they've made the right decision to come to a new country away from everything that is familiar. So if you're that kind of person who thrives, and I mean thrives on social connection, thrives on being close to their family and being close to their friends, then you might struggle a little bit. Now, what I would advise here is for you to, even before you leave your home country, think about what options are available in the country you're moving to in terms of building a social life or building social networks. Okay, so a good place to start would be considering what your hobbies are and if there are any groups of like-minded people that you can join when you first move to a new country. Thankfully, in a lot of countries, Australia inclusive, they've got all these migrant programs, and some of them are done through community centers as well, where you can actually be engaged in different types of groups. So just find something that suits you, something that speaks to your kind of interest, and maybe join those sorts of groups. And again, if you're a faith kind of person, for someone coming from Nigeria, for instance, we're very religious, and one of the places where we readily find community is in church. So if you're that kind of person, church is another great option for you. But as well, what I would say here is if you have made that decision to move to another country, that's an adventurous move already on its own. And so maybe you just want to take it a notch further and be more flexible, more open in your new environment and create new interest and just engage with other people. And yeah, that can actually help. So moving on to number 6 and the final one. Okay, here I want to talk about people who have issues with financial discipline, people who have problems generally with managing their finances. And the point that I want to bring out here is the fact that Australia in particular is a place where credit is easily accessible. And I think this also applies in a lot of other developed countries. So you can very easily fall into debt and then realize that you're actually not thriving. You're just living to pay off debt. You can get your phone on credit. You can buy a car on credit. You can live in a house on credit, okay? And if you're not careful, these things pile up very quickly and very easily. And then you find that you're drowning in debt and you just can't see a way out. I see a lot of people who struggle with this, people who are working back to back, working from job to job, people who are working back to back, taking shifts all over the place because there's so much debt they have to pay that they can't stop, they can't take a break. And I've seen people who have broken down from living their lives like that, having no time to rest, no time for themselves. Okay? So these are other people who might struggle to thrive, like actually thrive. So here I'm not just talking about surviving and living day to day. I'm talking about thriving and enjoying your new life in your new country. Okay? So these are my 6 reasons. So now I am really curious. Tell me in the comment section if you've ever heard any stories related to what I've been talking about here. Maybe someone who has relocated, found that it wasn't for them and they left for whatever reason. Obviously, I'm not saying you should mention names, but is this something or is there any of what I have spoken about here that you can relate to? I would like to know in the comment section as well. Okay. And if there are other tips that you can share for people to be aware of in terms of settling in a new country and doing it well, like settling successfully and actually beginning to thrive and enjoy their lives in the new country, please do not hesitate to share in the comment section. I enjoy reading your comments. All right, before I leave, I'm just going to leave you with one thought, which is for you to be very clear on what you stand for, what your values are, what your principles are. As much as I am all for being an open-minded person and letting that process refine you in the sense that you're able to actually unlearn things where it is necessary, relearn things, challenge some of your own belief patterns and your thought processes and your values. I am all for that, because I believe that that's how we evolve and that's how we grow as humans. But at the same time, okay, I have found it really helpful to know what I stand for. I have found it really helpful to know the sorts of things that I cannot compromise on, because these things are integral to who I am as a person. They are essential to maintain a healthy sense of self. So I would encourage for you to be really clear on that as well. It will help you through a lot of these curly situations when you move to a new country. So that was just my final thoughts. And with that, I am going to end this video here. Please do not forget to check out the videos that I have made previously, which I recommended in this one, and my other videos as well, okay? And I'll see you again in my next video. Thank you for liking. Thank you for subscribing. Bye-bye, and see you again soon.